His influence, even to this day, is tremendous, and I don't really have time to talk about all the details, but for beyond his just preaching abilities, there are so many things that he did influence. He did have an influence on the liturgy. Now, as you know, the usual liturgy that we use throughout the year, attributed to St. John Chrysostom. By the way, don't be under the impression that he wrote the form we have today. In fact, it's kind of, he was an editor, a synthesis of, he took what was going on in his church of Antioch, and he saw what was going on in Constantinople, kind of blended the two, refined it, and then had the form of liturgy in a very basic early Byzantine form. Because if you had me or anyone else for liturgy classes, you know that liturgy evolved through the centuries. What we do now, John Chrysostom would not even recognize. Okay. Because at the time of John Chrysostom, he walked in the door, said, "Peace be to all," and then began the epistle. Okay. I mean, that's how much has evolved and has changed. So to this day, anyone from the Byzantine stem liturgically, whether you're Orthodox or Catholic, use the liturgy of John Chrysostom as the normal Eucharistic liturgy. We remember him on the calendar on 4 different times. January 27th, the translation or his transfer of relics from Comana to Constantinople. January 30th, the celebration of the 3 holy hierarchs, Basil the Great, John Chrysostom, and Gregory the Theologian. His repose on September 14th, and then of course his real feast day, November 13th, and the reason that day was chosen because that was the day he was enthroned at Constantinople. So that's my little run-through. Any questions so far? Clear as well? In Constantinople, like I said, when John Chrysostom was bishop, he was loved by the people because of his eloquence, his strict lifestyle, his charity. But his attempts to reform the clergy and all that met him a lot of anguish really was unfortunate. And the part about the Jews that became something unfortunate too, remember, things have ripple effects throughout history. You know, a few hundred years later, there was an Augustinian monk by the name of Martin Luther. And Martin Luther was a very strict monk, and he liked other monks that were of that example. So it's no accident that John Chrysostom caught his imagination. So Martin Luther took several of John Chrysostom's early works and then translated the Greek into modern German. Okay, so that was, when was Luther? 15? Pardon me? 1400, okay. Well then, a few centuries later, someone else in Germany picked them up. Adolf Hitler, and say, oh, well, there's a constant history here of hating Jews. So, but that certainly was not what Chrysostom had in mind or ever envisioned, believe me. Okay. Now, this intrigue that was going on about getting Chrysostom removed, we'll talk a little bit about that. There lived in Alexandria a very revered priest called Isidore the Hospitable, because he was already and always ready to care for strangers. This man was known for his virtuous life, his wisdom, and his kindness. He was already 80 years old, but Theophilus harbored a grudge against Isidore, and at that time, a very wealthy widow gave Isidore 1,000 pieces of gold so that he might purchase clothing for poor people, orphans, and the poor widows of Alexandria. While giving him the money, she begged Isidore to say nothing to the bishop or patriarch, Theophilus, fearing that he might take the money and waste it on the erection of lavish buildings or some of his other pet projects. So Isidore took the gold and did as the widow requested, but somehow Theophilus learned about this and was not a happy camper. And so Theophilus, as I said, who was extremely money hungry, became furious with Isidore, and hoping to dirty his reputation of this holy righteous priest, brought against him a grave accusation that was untrue, accused him of a gay act with a young sailor. And the innocent Isidore, 80 years old, thought, okay, bring in the sailor for questioning. And so when no one could be produced, they bribed a sailor to come in and then brought the accusation against this holy priest. So later the truth was found out, but Isidore, already old and weak, said, I'm going to a monastery, I don't need to put up with this. And so that's what went on. So. The Times Chrysostom was banished. It really looked official. They had to quote the Synod of the Oak and all these official sounding things. But really, they were just a sham of jealousy and intrigue and all the things that were going on. Now, we are lucky that we have many of Chrysostom's writings. In fact, some of them were copied down as he gave them. He actually had like little scribes in the crowd. And so we're very fortunate that we have so many of his wonderful books in English. John Chrysostom on marriage and family life. One thing, Chrysostom was a strict monastic, but he's one of the rare few fathers who had a lot of positive things to say about marriage. And also about family life. He counsels parents over and over again. Bring up your children with the Word of God. Bring them to church. Okay, what are we saying today? Bring up your children with the Word of God. Bring them to church. So, same problems that are going on. Again, about his almost obsession with helping the poor. His work on wealth and poverty. I didn't bring it here, but he also wrote a wonderful treatise on the priesthood. And that one is, I think every deacon and seminary student had to read. And my main text for the class, as well as this talk, called Golden Mouth, The Story of John Chrysostom, Ascetic, Preacher and Bishop, by J.N.D. Kelly. I do have 2 extra copies if any of you are interested. However, it is $30 a book. It wasn't that expensive when I bought mine, but Some early writings on John Chrysostom by Donald Atwater, and The Fathers of the Eastern Church by Robert Payne. Very, very good books. And last but not least, our current Pope, Benedict XVI, the Doctors of the Church, has a wonderful, wonderful chapter on John Chrysostom. He tones down some of the dirt, but that's all right.